So on to section 3, creating a Flappy Bird game. So in this section, we will be building our first game, and it's going to be the really popular Flappy Bird type game. So in the first video, we will be crafting our scene, creating our first script, taking a look at a few Unity methods come right into the script as soon as you create the script itself. In the second video, we will be taking a closer look at rigid bodies. You may have heard me mention rigid bodies before. We are actually going to be using them in our game to actually get the bird to flop up and down while it's in the air. And then we will be adding the player input to actually get the player to tap on the screen, or in this case here, click the button on the computer to make the bird fly a little bit up in the air. After that, we will be adding a camera follow script, then adding colliders and player death, creating UI text and adding buttons, resetting the game, player victory, and then using on-click listeners. By then, we should really have a fully built-out game, but then I want to show you a couple of debugging tools that you can use to help fix up any sort of errors that might come up in the future. And I also want to show you how to modify Flappy Bird for the mobile devices, so we'll take a quick look at that later on. So in the first video here, we will be crafting our scene, creating our first script, and then taking a look at those Unity methods. So we'll start off by creating our 2D project in the Unity engine. Pick some images or game objects that you'd like to use. Perhaps you want to find them from the asset store or even just find them on Google, and be sure to place them in your hierarchy when you have imported them into your project. Once we have our scene set up, let's create our first script. Before we actually start doing any coding, we'll take a look at a few Unity-specific methods that are really important to know. These three methods are awake, start, and update. So let's head over to our desktop and make sure that you have Unity open. So right now we're going to give this project here a name, and let's just call it a Flappy Floppy. Then make sure that your project is in 2D project and just hit create project. So over here on my desktop, I have a couple of asset packs, and I'm going to be importing these into my project. I actually got these asset packs on the asset store, on the Unity asset store. So if you wish, you can go ahead and find them. They actually are the same names, what these files are actually called. So you can find these on the asset store if you wish to use the same assets that I am using. So when ready, take your assets and put them into your asset folder in your project window. Okay, there we go. So we have our asset packs imported right now. So let's work on creating our scene. So what we want is a parallax scrolling background. So we want to have a nice background for our game so our bird is actually flying in front of the background. So we have a little bit of a scene going on back of it. So let's find a beach sky asset right here. And there's actually two ways that we can do this. We can just throw it in like that, or we can actually create an empty game object, and we can call this here background. Now, in order to get the game object to actually show the background on the game object, we actually have to add something called a sprite renderer. So add the sprite renderer, and then move the beach sky image into the sprite render. And then you can delete this. So either way is fine to do this. I just want to show you how a sprite render really works for the future. So when you're ready, just try to resize this a bit more and just get it to the way that you would like with your camera. Another way too is that you can increase the size of the camera if you wish. So in this case here, maybe I want to make it 6 instead. And just change the scaling to how you would like it. So this is a pretty good start for a background right here. So let's add a couple of more objects in here. So let's just create a couple more game objects that are going to be childs of the background. And we'll just call these clouds. Or just cloud. And let's add a sprite renderer there. And now let's throw a beach cloud on that. If you might actually need to move this forward to get it to on the z-axis to get it to appear, and then you can just adjust that any way that you like. Now let's add a couple more clouds. So we're actually going to duplicate this for right now. So in order to duplicate on a Mac, just hold down Command D. And we're going to add a total of 5 clouds. Okay, so you can actually mess around with these a little bit. You can move them all around. Move some like right over there, over here. And you can even give these some different sprites if you wish. So for example, here I also have beach cloud number 3. So I can actually change this sprite over here just by dragging and dropping it in yet again. And then I'll have a smaller cloud. And I think I'll also change cloud number 4. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So save your scene and give your scene a name, like scene 1. And now what we can do is let's add a ocean wave right over here. So underneath the background, just create another game object, and let's call this one here ocean. Add a sprite renderer, and now let's put in our wave image right over here. And there's our water. And now you just got to scale this a little bit. Okay, so we're going to have a couple of obstacles in this scene. And what I think would be pretty nice to put in here are a couple of mountains. So what we're going to do is, once again, you can just duplicate these and duplicate them 3 times, and then select all of them by holding down Shift and then dragging down. And we are just going to rename these here mountain. And this can be mountain 1, and then 2. So we have mountain, mountain 1, and then mountain 2. So what we're going to do here is we're going to change the sprites on these. And we're going to put in this beach mountain. So drag in the beach mountain. Let's see, maybe we might actually have to push it up a bit, and there's one. So actually what we see right here is the beach mountain's scale is a little bit too long. So what we want to do is we want to make it a bit smaller. And that looks actually pretty good. So let's space these out a bit. We'll put one mountain up here. We want it a little bit above the water and a little bit into the sky. We'll have one slightly larger one. We can make longer. And we can leave that one right there because it is pretty long. And then we're going to move this one here over here. And we'll make this one here maybe up a bit more, and we'll just make it a bit larger. Okay, so we have a cool little scene going on right here. So we have imported our background, our clouds, our ocean, and we also have our mountains. So the last thing that I would like to do is actually create our player. So create another empty game object. And this one here we're going to call player. So add a sprite renderer. And now in my birds pack, I'm going to take the bird that I actually would like to use for this one here, which would be bird number 3. Well, let's see how this one here looks. Okay, this one here looks pretty cute. And I actually want this one out of the range of the camera right now, but I'm actually going to put the camera in focus over here for right now, because we want the camera to actually show the player right where the player is going to start. So, as I said before, in Flappy Bird, camera should be following the player as the player is moving throughout the scene. So this is going to be a sort of parallax scrolling background. So starting the camera over here is fine. Okay, so our scene is set up right now. This is really all that we needed to get a basic Flappy Bird scene going on. Next, what we are going to do is we are going to take a look at a quick C# script here for Unity. So go in here and just create a quick folder, and we're going to call this one here scripts. And we're going to store our scripts in here. So do a create C# script, and what we are going to do is we're going to rename this to player controller. Okay, so open this script up for editing in MonoDevelop. So as soon as your editor opens, you should have this script open with a couple of different functions. So the start function and update functions are always going to be in the editor as soon as you open them up. So what do these methods do exactly? This method right over here, the start method, is used to initialize any variables or any other set objects at the beginning of the game. So the start method is actually only called once in the entire lifetime of the script. So this is basically used for initializing basically different variables or game objects or components of those game objects as soon as the script begins. Then next, Oh, and just like one really quick thing right here, it doesn't seem like... Alright, there. For some reason the name didn't change the class name. Alright, so the other method right over here, the update function, runs code every frame during the game and is used to implement any kind of game behavior, really. This is typically where we call other methods and put code in to be continuously run. So really, you should try to avoid putting a lot of code and for different purposes inside of the update method. The reason why is because we can have a problem called spaghetti code. And spaghetti code normally occurs when there's just way too much code within one method, and you really just can't figure out what's going on within that method. It's just really unorderly. So it's a really good idea to actually create your own custom methods and then put those inside of the update function. So the last function I would actually like to go over is the awake function. So as you could tell, the awake method actually does not appear as soon as the script loads up. The reason why is that there are actually other Unity methods that do not come as soon as a script starts up, but they are available through the Unity API. You just have to look them up. So one of them is called awake. So awake is actually quite similar to start, but the main difference between awake and start is that awake initializes any game variables or game states before the game even begins. Start, on the other hand, begins as soon as the game has started to run. So just like start, awake can be used to call once in a lifetime and basically is used to initialize a lot of different game variables as well. And just like in start, it can only be used in one instance of the script's lifetime. It is best practice to use awake to set up different references between scripts and start to pass information back and forth, since awake is always being called before start functions. So there are also a lot of different methods that we will go through with Unity. Awake is just one of the out-of-the-box methods that you can find. There's many different others. So one other thing that I would like to go over is the console of the Unity engine. So if you take a look at your engine and click on this window right over here, you can actually see that we have a couple of errors, but they're nothing really that big. But what if you get an error in your code? So one thing that you can do in case if you ever did get an error in your code is that you can use something called a print statement. When you're using a print statement, you can see where the code is actually hitting. So you could type out something here like it's working. Then when you enter play mode, you can see in the update function, since the update function is running every frame, where exactly the code might be breaking. So in this case here, we really don't have anything put into our update function, so the print statement should just go ahead and print. So you may have noticed that nothing actually printed out to the console right there. And the reason why is because our script is not attached to the player inside the scene. So in order to add the script, you can go into the add component and type in the name of your script and then add it that way. So now the script is actually in the scene. So once you hit play, now it should print. And there we go. So actually this print statement would have still worked in the start method function the same way. The only reason why I decided to put it into the update function is because pretty much when you are coding and a lot of your code is going to be in somewhere in the update function, it's really proper to put a print statement between the lines of the code. So then this way here, you can actually see in case if a certain area might have broken or might have been broke, and then you know where exactly to pinpoint the error. So a little bit more into debugging later on, but I just wanted to give you guys an example of how the console works as well as print statements.